The Fitter's Secret. A story about a corset maker in Victorian London and the client whose measurements change everything. Part 1. The Profession. Harriet Voss had chosen her life with more intention than anyone knew. From the outside, it looked like practicality. A woman of modest means, unmarried by 30, establishing a small but respectable corsetry workroom on a quiet street in Marylebone. Sensible, even admirable in its way. Women nodded approvingly when they spoke of her. Self-sufficient, they said. Disciplined. They were not wrong. They were simply incomplete. Harriet had chosen this work because it put her hands on women's bodies every single day, and the world not only permitted it, the world required it of her. Sent its daughters and wives and widows through her door and asked her, please, to attend to them closely, to kneel at their hips, to reach around their waists, to press her fingertips to their ribs and measure the precise distance between one breath and the next. She did this with a professionalism that was, in its own way, a work of art. But she noticed everything. The warmth of skin through a thin chemise on a winter morning. The way some women held themselves as if apologizing for the space they occupied, and the way others stood like they were daring the room to complain. The geography of shoulder and hip and waist that was entirely different for every woman who climbed her narrow stairs. Harriet knew female bodies the way a musician knows an instrument, not just the notes, but the resonance. Particular weight of a thing. She had no word for what she was. London in 1887 offered her none. There was only the work, and the work was enough, or she had decided long ago that it would have to be. She was reviewing a commission on a Thursday evening in November, the gas lamp low, the street outside gone quiet, when she heard the carriage stop below her window. The woman who came through her door a few minutes later was veiled, not unusually so for a private client arriving after dark. She was tall, taller than most, and moved through the narrow doorway with an unhurried, liquid grace that made Harriet set down her pencil. "Miss Voss," the woman said. Her accent was unplaceable, musical and precise, as if English were something she had decided to master and then improved upon. "I was told you are the finest fitter in London. I was told, more importantly, that you are discreet." "Both are true," Harriet said. "Please sit." The woman settled into the client's chair. Then she reached up and removed her veil. Harriet had fitted countesses. She had fitted women who had sat for Pre-Raphaelite painters. She kept her expression still now through an act of will. "My name is Seraphine," the woman said. "My requirements are particular." "They always are," said Harriet, and picked up her tape. Part 2. The Measurements. She began at the shoulders, as she always did. Standard enough. Seraphine held herself very still, which experienced clients knew to do, but there was a quality to her stillness that was different from mere cooperation. She was not enduring being touched. She was receiving it. The distinction Harriet had learned was when you felt in your hands. She moved to the bust, made her note, moved to the underbust, then the waist. Harriet paused only for a fraction of a second, only long enough to be certain of what the tape was telling her. She was certain. The measurement was impossible, not unusual, not merely slender. Geometrically, structurally impossible for a human ribcage. Her hands, holding the tape ends, were nearly touching each other. She wrote it down. "Is something wrong?" Seraphine asked. She had been watching Harriet's face in the glass, not her own reflection, Harriet's face. "Nothing at all," Harriet said. "I am simply being precise." She moved to the hips. This was where she knelt, as she always did, the tape unspooling to its full length. At this proximity, the candlelight fell differently, and Harriet became aware, for the first time, of something she could not immediately explain, a faint luminosity to Seraphine's skin. Not pallor, not cosmetics, something beneath the surface, like a banked fire scene through frosted glass. The hips began correctly, widened as expected. Then, at a point lower than she anticipated, they narrowed again, not in the way of a fashionable figure, but asymmetrically, decisively, as if the body had changed its mind about what it intended to be. The silk of Seraphine's gown shifted. Harriet caught the suggestion of something beneath it, something that did not hold the light the way fabric should. She recorded the numbers. They made no architectural sense. She was already solving them. "You have remarkable hands," Seraphine said quietly. Harriet stood. The words had a quality to them, not flattery, observation, as if Seraphine had been waiting until she was certain before naming what she saw. "Thank you," Harriet said. This commission will take some time. I will need to construct a new pattern entirely. I expected as much, said Seraphine, and the faintest smile curved her lips. I will return next week for a first fitting. She replaced her veil. She descended the stairs. Harriet listened to the carriage pull away and sat down and did not immediately pick up her pencil. Part 3, The Returns. She came back every Thursday. The commission was complex, Seraphine explained. She was particular about the boning. The lacing placement needed adjustment. Each week there was some legitimate technical reason to return, and each week the reason was thin enough that both of them knew it was a pretext, and neither of them said so. Harriet began preparing for Thursdays, not in ways she would have been able to explain. She banked the fire higher. She kept the better candles lit. She found herself reviewing the appointment in her mind on Wednesday evenings, turning over the problems of the pattern, and underneath the pattern, less examinable things. Seraphine wore different gowns each week, each one requiring slightly different adjustments, each one providing reason for Harriet's hands to move across different geography. And each week the gown was more elaborate below the waist. The bustles grew larger. The underskirts multiplied. Whatever lay beneath them was increasingly and perfectly concealed. Harriet noticed this too. She said nothing. Their conversations deepened. Seraphine asked about the work not politely, but with genuine curiosity. How had Harriet learned to read what a body needed, rather than imposing what fashion demanded? What did it feel like to know, the moment her hands found a client's frame, exactly what the structure required? And then one evening, while Harriet was pinning a side seam and Seraphine stood with her arms slightly raised, the question arrived. "Do you find women beautiful, Miss Voss?" The pin stayed steady in Harriet's fingers, years of practice. "I find the work beautiful," she said. Seraphine looked down at her. "That is not what I asked." A silence. The fire shifted. Harriet smoothed the seam. "I find," she said carefully, "that I am suited to this profession in ways that go beyond training." Seraphine said nothing for a moment. Then softly, "Yes, I thought so." She did not press. She did not make it uncomfortable. She simply received the answer Harriet had given, the true one, beneath the careful words, and held it with the same quality of attention she gave everything else. The following Thursday, she arrived in a gown whose back lacing required Harriet to work very slowly and very close for a very long time. Harriet understood she was being offered something. She did not name it. But her hands, always honest even when her voice was not, moved with a tenderness that exceeded the purely professional, and Seraphine was still beneath them in a way that was not merely patience. Part 4. The accident that was not. The 6th Thursday. The commission was, technically, nearly complete. The foundation garment was extraordinary. Harriet knew it was the finest thing she had ever made. A structural achievement that should not have been possible, fitted to measurements that should not have existed. She had solved it the way she solved everything, by setting aside what she expected and attending, instead, to what was actually there. She was fastening the final hooks when it happened. Later, Harriet would think about the angle. She would think about the precise placement of Seraphine's hand on the fitting stand, the shift of her weight. She would consider the physics of what followed. And she would conclude, with a certainty she found she did not mind at all, that Seraphine had planned every element of it down to the last inch. The broadest of the underskirts caught on the fitting stand's lower bracket. It pulled. The bustle frame tilted, and the entire magnificent architecture of silk and crinoline and horsehair that had, for 6 weeks, so perfectly done its work simply fell. The sound it made was almost musical. Harriet stood very still. From the waist up, Seraphine was as she always was, pale as winter light, impossibly beautiful, watching Harriet's face with those dark, steady eyes. Below the waist, where fabric had been, there was something else entirely. Scales, but that word is too cold, too simple. They caught the candlelight the way the inside of a shell catches light, a warm iridescence, shifting between bronze and gold and the deep green of a river in summer. The form they covered tapered gracefully from the narrow hip, long and sinuous and entirely, genuinely beautiful, coiled slightly on the floor of the fitting room like something that had decided to rest. Seraphine had gone perfectly still, the stillness of a creature waiting to know whether it must flee. Harriet's hands were still raised from where she had been working at the hooks. She lowered them slowly. She took one step forward. And then, with the careful, unhurried attention she brought to every body that had ever stood before her, she crouched down and rested her fingertips, very lightly, at the place where warm human skin became something ancient and scaled and warm in an entirely different way. She felt Seraphine's breath leave her. "The lower boning," Harriet said quietly, "will need to be reconsidered. The structure here is self-supporting." She let her fingers trace the line of it slowly, learning. "I overcalculated the reinforcement." A sound from above her, almost a laugh, caught somewhere in the throat before it arrived. "No one," Seraphine said, "has ever said anything like that to me." "No one," Harriet said, "has ever fitted you properly." She rose to her feet. She met Seraphine's eyes. Neither of them looked away. Part 5, what she had always wanted. Harriet went to the window, not to look out. To have a moment with her own hands, her own breath, the familiar steadiness of the work she'd built her life upon. Behind her, the soft sound of Seraphine settling, the small, liquid movement of her rearranging herself on the long chaise that ran along the fitting room wall. "How long have you been doing this?" Seraphine asked. Her voice was different now, quieter, stripped of the slight performance that social interaction requires. 21 years, Harriet said, and in 21 years. Has there been anyone? No. The word came out plainly, without self-pity, without drama. A simple fact she had been keeping in a drawer for 2 decades. She turned back. Seraphine was watching her with an expression that Harriet had no name for, something between recognition and grief and a kind of aching patience. "I have lived for a very long time," Seraphine said. "I have moved through your world carefully, always clothed, always correctly shaped to your eyes, always at the appropriate distance." She paused. "People manage me. They accommodate me, they are careful around what they sense but cannot see." "Yes," Harriet said. She understood this. She understood it precisely. "You did not manage me," Seraphine said. "From the first evening, you simply attended to me, as if what you found were simply something true that deserved to be known." Harriet crossed the room. She sat in the chair opposite the chaise, close enough that the candlelight held them both. "I chose this work," she said, and then stopped, and began again. "I chose this work because it was the only world in which I was permitted to be entirely myself. In here, my hands are not strange. My attention is not strange. I am allowed to notice everything. I am allowed to," she stopped again. "To love what you see," Seraphine said softly. The words arrived with the specific weight of a thing finally named. "Yes," Harriet said. Seraphine reached out her hand slowly, giving Harriet every opportunity to sit back, to reconsider, to retreat behind the professional stillness she had perfected over 21 years. Harriet did not move back. She took the offered hand in both of hers. It was cooler than a human hand. She had known it would be. "Tell me what you want," Seraphine said. "Not what you are permitted, what you want." No one had asked her this, not once, not in her entire careful, constructed life. Harriet looked at their joined hands. Her own worn, experienced, capable of extraordinary delicacy. Seraphine's pale and long-fingered, the inner wrist faintly luminous. She turned it over gently and pressed her lips to the pulse point, which was there, and which was real, though it moved at a rhythm different from any she had felt before. "I want," Harriet said against Seraphine's wrist, "to stop containing things." The sound Seraphine made in response to that was very soft and very warm, and for Harriet, after 21 years, it was something very close to a rival. What passed between them then, in the candlelit fitting room on the quiet street in Marylebone, was gentle and unhurried and thorough, the way Harriet did everything. It was nothing like what novels suggested, and nothing like what she had privately imagined, and entirely, completely itself. Seraphine was luminous in the low light, extraordinary and patient and present, and Harriet's hands, which had spent a lifetime learning the language of the female form, found that they already knew how to speak. Part 6, Dusk. Afterwards they were quiet together. The fire had burned low. The candles were stubs. On the fitting table, the commission, that masterpiece of impossible architecture, lay finished and perfect, and for the moment entirely beside the point. Seraphine's hand moved through Harriet's hair with a slow, curious attention, learning, the way Harriet had always touched. "I should tell you," Seraphine said, "that I am not entirely free to remain. My kind are bound to move, season to season. We do not stay fixed in one place, one life." A pause. "I have been in London longer than I intended." "Why?" Harriet asked. Seraphine looked at her. "You know why." Harriet did know. She had known since the second Thursday, if she was honest. Perhaps since the first evening when Seraphine had watched her face in the glass instead of her own reflection. "When do you leave?" Harriet asked. "Soon," Seraphine said. "The season turns, I feel it." She tucked a strand of hair back from Harriet's face with one careful finger. "I would not ask you to." "Where?" Harriet said. Seraphine was quiet for a moment. "Somewhere warmer, the coast of another country, somewhere with old water and older stories." The corner of her mouth curved. "Somewhere no one will find my measurements unusual." Harriet sat up. She looked at the fitting table. At the measuring tapes coiled there, the pincushions, the ranked spools of thread in every color, the tools of her 21 years. She looked at Seraphine. "I would need to pack," she said. Seraphine stared at her. "Harriet, there is not very much. The tools, some patterns. I own very little that is not the work. I did not ask you." "No," Harriet said. "You didn't." She stood and moved to the fitting table and began, methodically, to roll the measuring tapes. "But I have spent 21 years arranging my life into the shape that the world required, and I am extremely tired of it." She found the tapestry bag she used for traveling commissions and began to fill it. "You said you feel the season turning." "How long do I have?" Seraphine's voice, when she answered, was doing something complicated. "Until morning." "Then I have time," Harriet said. "I am a fast packer." She heard the long, graceful movement behind her, Seraphine rising from the chaise, the soft sound of her approach. Then two cool hands settled on her shoulders and lips pressed to the back of her neck, and Harriet went still for just a moment, her hands full of measuring tapes. "You are extraordinary," Seraphine said against her hair. "I have been told I am sensible," Harriet replied. Seraphine laughed. It was a real laugh, full and warm and unguarded, nothing like the carefully calibrated social sound she had arrived with 6 weeks ago. Harriet found she wanted to hear it for a very long time. She finished packing. She banked the fire. She left a note for her landlady that was professional and said nothing. At the door of the workroom, she paused and looked back at it one last time. The forms lined along the wall in the near dark. The shapes of women she had known with her hands and never otherwise. The carefully ordered life she had built from the only freedom available to her. It had been enough. She had decided long ago that it would have to be. She closed the door. Seraphine's carriage was waiting in the dark street, the horse patient, breath clouding the cold November air. Seraphine stood at the carriage door, watching her descend the steps. "You are certain," Seraphine said, not a question, exactly. An offering of space, in case Harriet needed it. Harriet looked at her, at the impossible elegance of her, and beneath that the ancient, luminous truth that fashionable London had never been equipped to deserve. "I have been certain about very few things in my life," Harriet said. "My work, and now this." Seraphine held out her hand. Harriet took it. The carriage door closed behind them, and the horse moved off into the dark city, and the room above the quiet street in Marylebone sat empty, the coals cooling, the measuring tapes gone. On the fitting table, the commission remained perfect, extraordinary, built for a body the world had no pattern for. Perhaps someone would know what to make of it. Perhaps not. It didn't matter anymore. The end. Thank you for listening to another Creatures of Desire story. Please like this video so that it gets recommended to more listeners, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Sapphic tales of fantasy and romance.